I had warned them, warned the HOA board that blocking my snowplow route wasn't just a bad decision, it was dangerous. But they laughed. They fined me, called me a liability. So when the whiteout came, I stayed quiet. And when their luxury SUV convoy vanished into the blizzard, swallowed whole by the very road they forbade me to clear, they panicked. They froze. And then they begged me to come save them. The man they tried to punish was the only one who knew how to get them out alive. This is the true story of how the HOA tried to bury me in rules but got buried in snow instead. Every winter since I'd moved into this quiet neighborhood tucked against the Rockies, I was always the first one stirring. Long before the sun edged above the peaks or the aroma of brewing coffee filled any home. My old International 4900 snowplow would growl to life in the garage. A sturdy beast from my days with the highway department, outfitted with heavy chains that clinked like armor, a reliable salt spreader mounted behind, and a cab heater that only warmed up when it darn well felt like it. The HOA board never sent a note of appreciation, never acknowledged the early hours I put in. That never fazed me. I wasn't out there for recognition or praise from them. I cleared those roads for the people who truly needed them open. For the older gentleman 3 streets over who had to make his dialysis appointments at the crack of dawn no matter the weather. For the dedicated nurse working night shifts pulling into her driveway when the rest of the world was still wrapped in sleep. For the single mother living on Elm Street scraping by at the local diner where one missed day could mean falling behind on rent and bills. I knew every nuance of those streets, the subtle dips where water pooled and froze first, the gentle slopes that turned deadly slick under a layer of ice. The hidden spots where drifts built up fast, like bullies blocking the path for anyone trying to get through. Our development, Ridgepoint Estates, was one of those picturesque foothill suburbs, full of winding cul-de-sacs and homes with mountain views that looked idyllic in brochures, but became a real challenge when winter hit hard. It was the kind of community where folks with plenty of time on their hands ended up on the HOA board, suddenly convinced they held the keys to running a small town. I mostly stayed out of it all. My years in the Army, followed by 2 decades in public works, had taught me what mattered getting the job done without fanfare. I didn't need salutes or thanks. I just needed the roads clear so ordinary people could go about their lives without fear of being trapped. The route I focused on every storm wasn't chosen lightly. It was the East Ridge Access Road, the primary most reliable outlet from the eastern side of the neighborhood, the one path that stayed viable when fierce blizzards drifted the main boulevard shut with walls of snow. I knew its critical role from bitter experience. 5 years back, during an unexpected early season blow, an ambulance had fought through massive drifts and barely reached a child in medical distress on time. That night, I'd battled 3-foot snow walls with my plow headlights, carving narrow tunnels through the chaos, opening the way just in time for the paramedics. From that moment, I treated it as my personal responsibility to keep the East Ridge Access Road passable, no matter how brutal the conditions or how early the hour. For 12 straight winters, no one complained, no one interfered. It just worked. Then came the change with the new board members. They arrived calling themselves a reform team, full of fresh ideas and energy. To me, they looked like people with shiny new SUVs, custom blazers, embroidered with the Ridgepoint Estates logo, and a confidence that outpaced their understanding of mountain winters. The new president, Derek Langley, struck me as the type who'd hire someone to clear his own driveway, but still wanted to take credit for community involvement. He'd drive past as I salted his curb at first light, offering only a quick wave, never stopping to say a simple thank you. One chilly morning in late November, before the heaviest snows arrived, I found a plain white envelope pushed under my garage door. Not sent through the mail, not emailed, just slipped there quietly like some kind of undercover notice. To Mr. Thomas Braddock, re-unauthorized snow removal operations. Effective immediately, you are to cease and desist from plowing any street within the Ridgepoint Estates community without written authorization from the HOA Board of Directors. This includes access roads, common areas, and all non-private driveways. Violators will be subject to escalating fines and legal recourse. Ridgepoint HOA Enforcement Committee. I read it twice, then a third time, letting the words sink in fully. Unauthorized snow removal after 12 years of being the one reliable force, keeping things moving through the worst storms these foothills could throw. I drove directly to the HOA office, nothing more than a converted pool house, stocked with file cabinets and a Keurig machine. Derek was there in a meeting with a couple of other board members casually sipping from a mug that boldly declared HOA lives matter. I didn't barge in yelling. I simply stood in the doorway, my boots still dusted with snow, and leaving wet prints on their clean floor, and asked calmly, "You're actually serious about this letter?" Derek looked up briefly from his tablet. "We've had reports of curb damage, inconsistent salt application, and serious liability concerns. It's become a risk we have to address." "The real risk," I said, keeping my voice level, "is someone not getting the help they need, because the only dependable exit route is left to drift shut." Lynn, the vice president, known for her direct and often sharp responses, spoke up next. "We're bringing in a professional snow removal contract, Thomas. This is about standardization, consistency, and proper oversight. Residents can't just operate independently. I've provided the consistency for years," I countered. "And you've only been overseeing things for a short while." Derek gave a small dismissive smile. "It's a new chapter for Ridgepoint, Mr. Braddock. If you'd like to be considered, submit a vendor application for next season." I walked out before my frustration boiled over into something sharper. The East Ridge access road, the vital lifeline I'd guarded religiously, was now officially off limits to me. As I stared at it the following morning, with light flakes beginning to coat the asphalt, I felt the shift in the air. The sky hung low and ominous, the wind carrying that distinctive chill that promised much more was coming. Winter wasn't easing in gently this year. It was preparing to strike with full force. And this time, the rules said I had to stand aside and let it. A few days after that infuriating letter, the orange barricades appeared. 2 heavy metal barriers rented from some outside contractor were planted squarely at each end of the East Ridge access road, like sentries declaring war on common sense. They weren't county issue, weren't marked by the sheriff or public works. Just bright orange steel with laminated HOA signs zip-tied on, flapping aggressively in the wind. Road temporarily closed. Unauthorized plowing prohibited. Violators will be prosecuted. Prosecuted. The word hit me harder than any gust ever could. For over a decade, I had kept that exact stretch of asphalt open when no one else could or would, and now the help I'd given freely was being labeled criminal. It wasn't the physical barrier that burned, it was the message underneath that rules written on clipboards in a heated pool house mattered more than a nurse getting home after a double shift, or a father reaching the hospital with his sick child. I didn't lay a finger on those barricades. Touching them would only give Derek and his committee the photo op they wanted. Rogue resident destroys HOA property. They weren't interested in safety. They wanted control, pure and simple. That same week, the glossy winter newsletter arrived, folded perfectly into my mailbox like an invitation to a gala. The cover showed Derek in a brand new white parka, grinning beside a catalog-perfect contractor plow that gleamed under studio lights. They had signed with ClearPath Services, a company from 2 towns over that had never once tested its equipment on our grades, our drifts, our ice-glazed curves. No emergency response agreement, no proven record in our terrain. Just a shiny logo and a fat check. Inside, Derek's quote took pride of place. "With ClearPath Services now on board, Ridgepoint Estates can finally enjoy professional, consistent, regulation-compliant snow removal. No more unpredictable individual efforts or outdated machinery." I laughed out loud in my driveway, the sound echoing off the garage door. Not because it was funny, but because it was suicidal stupidity dressed up as progress. If that pretty truck bogged down halfway up Hawthorne Hill, and it would, the entire eastern loop would be strangled for hours. One stalled vehicle on that incline didn't just block a lane. It blocked everything. 2 days later, the first real snow of the season arrived. It started gentle, almost polite fat flakes, drifting lazily past porch lights, frosting rooftops, and mailboxes, turning every cul-de-sac into a Christmas card scene. Kids tumbled out in mismatched gloves, hurling half-formed snowballs, while parents watched from open garages, coffee steaming in their hands. I stood in my own garage, running a gloved hand over the plow blade, tightening chains, checking belts and fluids, the way an old soldier checks his rifle before battle. By nightfall, the tone changed completely. Forecast models shifted hard. A monster system dropping out of Wyoming veered east and locked onto our valley like a missile. The National Weather Service upgraded from 8 to 12 inches to 24 plus with wind gusts topping 50 miles an hour and sustained speeds that would sculpt drifts 10 feet high. Whiteout conditions were no longer possible. They were guaranteed. I called Derek. Voicemail. I texted. Tom Braddock. East Ridge Access Road needs to stay open tonight. This system is the real deal. Your contractor won't make it in time. His reply came 34 minutes later. Derek Langley. Weather is being monitored. Please allow the professionals to handle this without interference. Interference. As if keeping people alive was some kind of hobby gone too far. I set the phone down and stared out at the darkening sky. The air had that electric bite that only comes before a true mountain blizzard, the kind that doesn't ask permission before it buries everything. I'd felt it in my knees since morning the old ache from shrapnel and cold winters past. The next morning the storm hit like God slammed a door. Wind didn't howl. It screamed in long, continuous fury. Snow didn't fall. It attacked horizontally, diagonally, upward, in swirling funnels that erased the world 10 feet beyond my porch light. By 7 o'clock, the East Ridge Access Road was already drifted waist-deep and climbing. The temperature plunged so fast, the snow turned dry and powdery, the kind that packs into concrete under wind pressure. I sat at the kitchen table with the scanner on listening to county units calling out closures, pileups, power outages. City plows were pulled off secondary roads to keep highways and hospitals open. Our neighborhood wasn't even on the priority list. At 9:12 a.m., my phone rang. Dave Meyer's sheriff's deputy old guard buddy voice nearly lost under the roar outside. Tom, please tell me that old rig is warm and ready. Fueled, chained, and impatient. We've got 3 HOA SUVs buried halfway up East Ridge. They were doing some kind of board tour. Visibility 0. Contractors nowhere. They're saying the route was supposed to be open. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar mix of anger and duty rise in my chest. Of course they went out anyway. Of course they scheduled a vanity parade in the middle of a blizzard. I was already pulling on my heaviest coat. On my way, Dave. I stepped into the garage, hit the opener, and watched the door rise on a wall of pure white fury. The engine caught with a roar that felt like defiance. And for the first time in 12 years, I rolled out knowing I was about to break their rules to keep people alive. The plow's diesel engine thundered to life, a familiar roar that drowned out the storm's rage for a moment and steadied my pulse. She was ready, chains tight, salt hopper full blade lowered and gleaming under the garage light. I mounted a GoPro on the dash for the first time that season, time-stamped and rolling not for glory, but for proof. If this went south, I wanted every second documented: the barricades blocking a critical route, the drifts swallowing everything, the absence of any professional help. I eased out slowly, the rig's weight pushing forward like an unstoppable force. The first barricade loomed ahead, orange metal half lost in swirling flakes, its sign whipping violently. No hesitation. The blade struck with a resounding crunch, metal twisting and folding as the barrier skidded aside into a drift, buried almost instantly. The second one met the same fate farther down, crumpled and tossed like scrap. The East Ridge Access Road was mine again, if only because nature demanded it. Outside, the blizzard was absolute chaos. Headlights cut narrow cones through a wall of white that rushed back at me, flakes so thick they danced and multiplied in the beams. Visibility hovered at 15 feet, sometimes less, the world reduced to a churning void. I navigated by instinct, the subtle tilt of the road under the tires, the memory of every curve and rise, etched from countless runs. Low gear, steady throttle chains biting deep into the pack. Snow piled in rhythmic waves against the windshield wipers, fighting a losing battle, until I cracked the window for air, the cold slamming in like a slap sharp and invigorating. 2 days earlier, I'd posted a warning on the community forum, measured responsible, no accusations. Neighbors, a severe storm is incoming with heavy accumulation and high winds likely causing whiteouts. The East Ridge Access Road has historically been vital for emergency access when the main routes close. If barricades remain, I won't interfere per HOA directive. Please prepare accordingly and stay safe. Tom Braddock. It disappeared quickly, likely moderated away. Private messages followed, thanks from grateful residents, questions if I'd still clear privately. I replied honestly, no. The rules were clear now. Halfway up Hawthorne Hill, the grade steepened and the plow labored harder. This stretch was always the killer, a relentless climb with narrow shoulders and hidden ice patches that could spin even chained tires. Drifts towered on both sides, now forming walls that narrowed the path to a precarious trench. Wind broadsided the cab, rocking the heavy frame, while salt sprayed behind in glittering arcs. The cab filled with the scent of diesel and cold metal, the heater finally kicking in with reluctant warmth. Then through the haze, shapes emerged. 3 SUVs lined the shoulder like defeated giants. 2 black Suburbans and a silver Lexus GX tilted and sinking fast. Hazard lights blinked faintly, desperate pulses of red and amber swallowed by the gale. Snow climbed their grills and doors, the lead vehicle nose down in a massive drift, the others blocked behind in a tangled chain. I braked carefully, chains gripping, and jumped out into the onslaught. The wind hit like a wall, tearing at my coat, driving ice crystals into every exposed inch of skin. Drifts sucked at my boots, thigh deep and exhausting. I slogged to the Lexus first, banging a gloved fist on the window. It lowered a crack, warm air escaping in a rush. Lynn's face appeared, pale eyes, red-rimmed makeup streaked from tears or melt. She looked shaken, stripped of her usual boardroom confidence. Tom, thank God. We're stuck. Derek's vehicle? Radio's out, phone's failing. The contractor never came. Stay inside, I shouted over the roar. Engines running, windows cracked for ventilation. I'm opening a path. She nodded frantically, mouth opening for more. But I was already moving. The next Suburban's door burst open as I approached. Derek stumbled out, snow caking his hair, and expensive fleece face ashen and lips trembling. No heavy coat, just slacks tucked into inadequate boots. He tried for authority, shouting into the wind. You're not authorized. This road is closed. I closed the distance fast, close enough to see the fear cracking his facade. You closed it, I said, voice low but carrying. You ignored the warnings, dragged your people out for photos in this mess, and now you want to talk authorization while they freeze. His words faltered, mouth working silently. The arrogance drained away, replaced by raw panic. Get back in, I ordered, before I leave you to it. He retreated without another sound. Back in the cab, I radioed Dave. Convoy found halfway up Hawthorne. 3 vehicles, multiple occupants. Clearing now, alert EMS for possible hypothermia. Copy, Tom. You're a lifeline out there. I dropped the blade and surged forward. Snow exploded in towering plumes on either side, the rig groaning under the load as I carved a 6-foot trench. Hydraulics strained, engine temperature climbing, but she held strong old iron, built for this. One by one, the SUVs emerged, the Lexus first creeping free. Derek's next taillights flaring, the last following tentatively. I guided them, single-file low gear, steady down the hill in a slow convoy. At the base, the wind eased slightly, visibility improving to where sheriff cruisers and an EMS van waited, lights cutting through the murk. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, watching in stunned silence. I stepped out as Derek emerged, last legs unsteady in the slush. He tried approaching, but crumpled to his knees. No one helped. He looked up, eyes glassy. Thank you. I glanced at the mangled barricades, now relics in the snow. Next time, I said, turning away, listen before the storm does the talking. 3 days later, instead of thanks, a new envelope arrived, a $1,250 from $2 fine for destruction of property and unauthorized operation. They weren't done fighting. Neither was I. The fine arrived like a slap after a rescue, folded neatly in an official envelope with the HOA letterhead that matched their newsletters and pool rules. $1,250 for destruction of HOA property barricades and unauthorized vehicular operation on managed roadways. Due by January 20th, with threats of suspended voting rights and liens if ignored. Almost laughable, if it weren't so petty. They'd nearly frozen on that ridge, engines idling desperately for heat, while the blizzard tried to claim them, and my reward was paperwork punishment. It wasn't about the money, or even the rules anymore. It was retaliation, and plain and vindictive, for making their authority look fragile in the face of real danger. I didn't toss it in the trash or fire off an angry email. I filed it carefully in a growing folder labeled HOA Retaliation Documentation. This was no longer just about emotion. It was about building a case that no amount of boardroom spin could dismantle. While they recovered in their warm homes, drafting violation notices, I started collecting evidence with the precision of someone who'd spent years maintaining records for public works audits. First, the raw data printed NOAA satellite images showing the storm's brutal path, hourly radar loops capturing the intensity weather logs, detailing gusts over 50 miles per hour and accumulation rates that turned roads lethal. I downloaded the GoPro footage, clear despite the chaos, time-stamped proof of the barricades blocking the route, the buried convoy, my plow, forcing the only path through. GPS tracks overlaid on maps, radio logs with Dave Myers and County Dispatch confirming the contractor's absence and the sheriff's dependence on me. But I dug deeper. I contacted Carlos Ramirez at Boulder County Emergency Management, a solid contact from a 2016 mudslide response, where we'd worked side by side hauling debris and shoring up roads. I laid it out in an email, the blocked East Ridge access road, the near tragedy, the HOA's stance. His response was prompt and gold. Confirmed. The East Ridge access road is noted in our contingency planning as a priority secondary egress for Ridge Point due to its elevation and historical drift issues. Restricting it without alternatives could impede emergency operations. I can supply an official statement or affidavit if needed. See Ramirez Boulder County EMO. HOAs might dominate their covenants, but they hated clashing with county oversight. I held off on storming any meetings with this stack. These boards operated like small courts, procedure over truth, leverage over facts. So I waited, gathering more quietly. The neighborhood, meanwhile, was alive with talk. Stories spread faster than melt in spring. People I barely knew stopped me at the mailbox or in the store. Heard you pulled them out of that mess. Tom, real hero stuff. My wife's on oxygen, if that road stayed shut. Porch drops appeared, cookies from the dialysis neighbor, a pie from the nurse's family. A retired teacher circulated a petition with dozens of signatures demanding I be reinstated as the designated emergency plow operator. Then Betty McLaren showed up. 79, feisty as ever, in her pink puff coat and oversized boots. She'd been in Ridge Point since day one. She climbed my steps one afternoon, clutching an old folder like treasure. My husband ran the HOA back when it meant organizing barbecues, not chasing power, she said with a wink. Thought you could use this. Inside original 1999 development maps, edges worn but clear. The East Ridge access road marked boldly as emergency priority route, clear first, and a margin note in faded ink. John B. Dependable in 98-99 blows, reliable asset. My name, my early work preserved before this new crowd arrived. I thanked her, voice thicker than intended. Means a lot, Betty. That road's always been more than asphalt, she replied. Don't let them forget. That night, Councilwoman Marissa Ortega called our district rep, someone I'd met during flood drills. Tom calls are pouring in from residents, the sheriff, even media, hints. What you did up there saved more than egos. If the HOA pushes this fine, they're treading on city codes about egress routes. I can connect you with the right channels. Public attention wasn't my goal, but it was pressure they couldn't ignore. I'll keep it in mind, I said. Appreciate the support. I pinned the fine to the fridge beside Betty's maps and Ramirez's email. Their game of letters, I was stacking a stronger hand. Soon after, another envelope came, softer tone. We value community safety and appreciate your past efforts. Protocol remains essential, but we're open to discussing formalized emergency roles. Contact the office for a meeting. Compliance will aid positive outcomes. Derek Langley. They were wavering, trying to pull me back under their umbrella without admitting fault. Classic retreat disguised as outreach. I set it aside with a quiet smile. The forecasts were already hinting at another system, colder, fiercer, gathering strength. Arrogance doesn't thaw easily. But the next blizzard wouldn't wait for meetings or apologies. It was coming, and it would test everything again. The second storm didn't wait for invitations or second chances. It arrived in the dead of night, stealthy at first, flakes tapping windows like distant warnings, then unleashing with a vengeance that rattled the house like an angry giant. I woke at 3:17 a.m., to the walls creaking under pressure, the wind moaning through the eaves in a low, relentless dirge. Old habits die hard. Decades outdoors taught me to read the signs. This wasn't just snow. This was a full-blown Arctic assault, the kind that turned roads into rivers of ice and visibility into a cruel joke. I pulled on layers, thermal base, insulated bibs, heavy parka, and headed to the kitchen for coffee that scalded my tongue, but cleared the fog. Through the frosted glass, the world had disappeared. Street lamps reduced to hazy glows in an endless swirl. Drifts already erasing lawn, edges, and climbing porch steps. My garage weather station screamed alerts, winds gusting past 50 temperature locked at 4 degrees, and dropping accumulation forecast pushing 30 inches before it eased. Radar showed a solid wall of purple, bearing down, stalled, and hungry. No call from Dave yet. No need to wait. I'd prepped the plow after the last rescue chains checked twice, hopper loaded to the brim, with salt fuel tanks full emergency kit, stocked with blankets, flares, and a thermos of hot broth. She waited in the dark like an old friend ready for war. The scanner crackled with chaos, county crews, overwhelmed ambulances stuck on highways, fire units, on standby for calls piling up. Dave finally broke through, voice edged with fatigue. Tom, it's worse than the models. Another group's pinned on East Ridge 4 vehicles this time. Same hill. Contractor's crawler broke down miles out. You available? Already rolling. You sure conditions are? I know what they are. I fired up the engine, the roar vibrating through the cab like thunder, answering thunder. The garage door lifted on a curtain of white fury, flakes blasting in sideways. I eased out, blade scraping fresh powder, the trench from last time, long erased by relentless gusts that sculpted new monsters overnight. The cold inside the cab was brutal at first, heater lagging as always. My breath fogged the windshield until I wiped it, clear beard icing over instantly. Navigation was pure memory, the road's crown under tires, the way the grade pulled before bends. Every push forward met resistance, drifts hardened into walls, wind slamming broadside and rocking the rig. Salt scattered behind in futile sparks, melting pockets, but losing the war. Climbing Hawthorne Hill felt like defying gravity itself. The incline bit hard, tires spinning briefly before chains caught. At one point, a gust nearly shoved me sideways. I countered with ballast weight and sheer will hydraulics, groaning as the blade carved deeper. Then faint headlights pierced the void ahead, weak flickering, half buried. 4 SUVs this time, tangled in a chaotic line. The lead one sideways across the lane, another nosed into a bank, the rest jackknifed behind like a failed chain. Hazard lights pulsed desperately, swallowed by the gale, almost as soon as they flashed. They'd ignored everything, the fine, the petitions, the close call barely a week old, and gone out again. Another leadership tour I'd pieced together later, board members and supporters meant for quick photos and posts about winter readiness. Clear path failed once more, roads closed everywhere, but pride pushed them onto East Ridge anyway. I honked long blasts that cut through the whale. A door creaked open on the nearest vehicle, and Greg, the younger landscaping committee guy, stumbled out, waving frantically, slipping in the pack. Braddock. They said it'd be fine. A short loop the contractor was supposed to pre-clear. Everyone okay? I yelled back, closing the distance. Cold panicking. Dennis tried walking for signal and fell. Janine's bad can't stop shaking. I directed them sharp pile into the middle suburban. Share heat, now. They moved fast, no arguments, just survival instinct kicking in. I backed up and began carving a wide turnaround blade, angled to shove snow into massive berms. The rig strained, engine roaring protest against depths that swallowed the hood at times. Ice rattled the windshield like hail from hell, cold seeping through seams despite the heater's valiant fight. 40 minutes of grinding work later, a blur of push, reverse push, the path took shape. Engines coughed to life behind me, SUVs inching free, one by one tires spinning before gripping the salted trench. As the last passed, windows fogged, faces pale shadows, I glimpsed Lynn again in the back seat. No panic this time, just a long, searching look that lingered. The convoy followed my taillights down, emerging at the base, where emergency lights finally cut through the murk. They'd learned something up there in the freeze, but whether it stuck remained to be seen. And as I parked the plow later, snow still raging outside, I knew the storm wasn't done teaching lessons yet. The full story of that second convoy's nightmare emerged in fragments over the following days, from sheriff dispatch logs, Dave shared quiet neighbor talks, and even a few ashamed admissions that slipped out later. It had been another of Derek's grand ideas, a winter preparedness visibility tour for board members and a select group of influential residents. The itinerary sounded harmless. On paper, drive the development's loops in a convoy of high-end SUVs, Stop for photos at key spots, like the repainted welcome sign capture content for the HOA website and social channels. Captions ready. You're bored in action during challenging weather. Proof they were hands-on leaders, not just email warriors. But the blizzard turned it into a disaster. They set out from the clubhouse around dawn just as the worst of the whiteout clamped down like a frozen fist. ClearPath Services was absent again, equipment tied up in wider county chaos highways. Closed priorities shifted to life-threatening calls. Common sense would have canceled everything, kept everyone inside, with hot drinks and monitors. Instead, they pushed on. 4 vehicles, 2 rugged Suburbans, a Range Rover, and a white Escalade that screamed status. Snow tires, yes, but no chains for real bite. No two-way radios beyond cell phones, no backup plan beyond optimism. They rolled past the twisted remnants of the old barricades. I hadn't bothered replacing them, and headed straight up East Ridge, figuring a quick circuit would be fine. Hawthorne Hill had other plans. The climb is sneaky, even on dry pavement, a steep winding pull with tight shoulders and a nasty curve where the south side drops into scrub and rock. In these conditions, it became a gauntlet of glazed ice and blinding crosswinds. Visibility collapsed to nothing. Flakes hammered windshields like buckshot. Janine, the board treasurer, usually calm and number-sharp, drove the lead Range Rover. Midway up, she eased off the gas on what felt like a slick patch, but the tires lost grip anyway. The vehicle slid sideways, then backward, rear bumper crunching into the curb and wedging firm against a hardened drift. The trailing Suburban swerved hard to avoid her, overcorrected, and slammed broadside across the lane metal, scraping in a grinding protest muffled by the gale. Chaos fed on itself. The Escalade attempted to skirt the mess and dove nose first into a deep ditch front end, crumpling slightly on impact airbags, puffing in a useless cloud. The last Suburban braked too late, rear-ending lightly, and spinning to block any retreat. In minutes, the wind shifted west, blasting fresh powder against doors and windows, piling drifts that climbed like living things. Trapped. No way forward, no reverse possible without traction or space. Inside, composure shattered fast. Cell signals flickered and died under the storm's interference. 911 calls dropped or queued endlessly. Some texted spouses frantic updates. Others tried the clubhouse line, voices rising as batteries drained. Greg attempted a shaky social media live narrating for help until his phone frosted and shut down. Dennis, the compliance coordinator, quick to issue violations on clear days, decided action was needed. He forced a door against the packed snow, stepped out, and tried trudging uphill for better reception or sight lines. The wind knocked him down immediately. He slid on hidden ice, tumbled several yards, and struck his head on a buried boulder. No severe damage, but blood welled and froze on his temple, dazing him enough to crawl back, groaning. Janine fared worse, emotionally curled in her seat, hyperventilating as the cold seeped in despite idling engines. Fingers tingling toward numbness, tears freezing on her cheeks. By the time Dave radioed me, they'd been pinned over an hour, the situation teetering toward real crisis. 1 injury, head lack, possible mild concussion, he said. Others showing hypothermia signs. EMS is mobilizing a crawler, but East Ridge is their only viable shot. I was already in the plow, engine growling, blade dropping as I rolled out into the maelstrom renewed. The previous path wiped clean drifts, rebuilt higher and harder, wind carved into unforgiving ridges. The rig plunged forward, hydraulics whining against loads that tested every bolt. Halfway up, a lone figure staggered into my lights, Dennis bloodied and disoriented, arms flailing. I braked, hauled him into the cab, wrapped him in a blanket, and pressed hot broth into his shaking hands. "They're up there," he gasped. "Janine's bad. Greg's trying to keep it together. Hold on." The convoy appeared like a frozen wreck, doors ajar, where possible figures clustered outside in futile huddles. Others sealed in with fogged windows. Janine sat in the snow, rocking sobs lost to the wind. I grabbed the bullhorn. All to the center, Suburban cram, in sheer heat. They complied instantly, stumbling through drifts, piling into one vehicle, 8 souls in a cramped, heater-blasting space. I distributed foil blankets, hand warmers, checked vitals. Janine slurred responses, extremities pale. Greg shivered but helped others. Radio went dead, then repeaters blinded channels silent. We waited in isolation, the plow idling nearby as drifts refilled my trench almost as fast as I'd made it. Help was coming, but time was the enemy. And in that frozen hold, faces turned toward my rig carried more than fear. Something was shifting deep, irreversible. The storm had stripped away the illusions, leaving only the truth of who showed up when it mattered most. Radio silence settled over us like another layer of frost, thick, oppressive, absolute. One moment, Dave's voice had crackled through with an ETA on the Snowcat and EMS crawler. The next, nothing. Channels dead static, replaced by an eerie void that amplified every sound inside the crammed suburban ragged, breathing the heater's desperate whine, the occasional sobs swallowed quickly. My emergency beacon blinked steadily from the plow's dash. Outside signal sent GPS pinging county dispatch, but no acknowledgement. The storm's interference had blinded the repeaters on the higher ridges, cutting us off from the world below. I leaned against the suburban's icy flank wind, tearing at my coat, scanning the white oblivion for any sign of approaching lights. Drifts were already reclaiming the trench I'd fought so hard to carve, snow spilling back in like sand through fingers. Time stretched thin and cruel. Minutes felt like hours in the sub-zero grip. Inside the 8 of them, huddled in a tangle of foil blankets and shared body heat, the cab fogged opaque from their breath. Janine sat curled in the back corner, knees drawn up, shivering in waves that rattled her teeth, despite the layers I'd wrapped around her. Her fingers had gone waxy pale at the tips, early frostbite creeping in. Greg hovered nearby, rubbing her arms vigorously, murmuring encouragements that sounded hollow against the gale outside. Dennis nursed his head wound in the front passenger seat, a makeshift compress pressed to the gash, blood crusted dark against his skin. He stared straight ahead. Silent now, the earlier bravado leached away by pain and cold. I climbed in briefly to check vitals again, pulses steady but thready, pupils responsive. Handed out the last of the warmer's adjusted blankets. The air smelled of fear sweat, melted snow, and the faint metallic tang of blood. "Help's coming," I said firmly, meeting as many eyes as I could in the dim interior light. "Beacon's active. They have our position. Just hold on." Janine looked up, then eyes glassy but focused. We thought it would be quick." Derek said the contractor had it handled. Greg snorted bitterly. Derek stayed back, safe in the clubhouse, calling the shots. A few murmurs rippled, resentment bubbling under the surface, raw and unspoken until now. I didn't pile on. No point. Focus on staying warm. Talk if it helps. Sing. Anything to keep blood moving. Someone started a weak recounting of past storms, voices overlapping in the confined space, grasping for normalcy. Stories of the 17 below, the ambulance delay that nearly cost a life, the one I'd pushed through to prevent. My name came up more than once, quiet thanks threaded through the tales. Outside I paced beside the plow, bullhorn ready, flares in pocket. The cold burrowed deep now, numbing toes, despite heavy boots beard a solid block of ice. Wind wailed in long, mournful howls that seemed almost alive, mocking our fragility. At one point, Dennis cracked the door and called out weakly, "Braddock, you didn't have to come. After the fine, the letters." I paused, meeting his gaze through the swirl. Wasn't coming for the board, Dennis, or the rules. He nodded slowly, something cracking in his expression, regret, maybe understanding. Janine's voice drifted out next, faint but clear. "We were wrong, all of it. No response needed. The storm said enough." Time dragged. The plow's clock ticked past 30 minutes of isolation. Hypothermia whispered at the edges, shivers turning to stillness, speech slowing. I climbed back in, periodically shaking shoulders, forcing movement, sharing the thermos's last dregs. Then, faint at first, a low rumble beneath the wind's roar, growing into the distinctive track clatter of a snowcat. Lights pierced the murk far below, amber and blue strobes cutting upward like beacons through fog. I whooped once, loud enough to carry inside. "That's them!" "Hold tight!" Relief flooded the cab, sobs turning to choked laughs, hands clasping. The snowcat crested first, massive treads, chewing through drifts like paper county seal, visible on the side. Behind it, the EMS crawler boxy tracked, built for exactly this. Deputy Dave Myers leaped out, first beard, iced eyes scanning until they found me. He clapped my shoulder hard. No words needed, just a nod of profound gratitude. Paramedics swarmed the suburban doors, flying open in a rush of warm air and efficient commands. Vitals checked, blankets swapped for heated ones, IVs prepped for the worst cases. Janine went first, carried gently to the crawler, oxygen mask in place. Dennis' next, head wound finally properly bandaged. Greg helped others his own shakes ignored until last. Dave pulled me aside as the transfer wrapped. Beacon got through clean. You bought them ours, Tom. They bought the lesson themselves, I replied. Twice. He glanced at the convoy survivors loading up. Think it'll stick this time. Colt has a way of etching things deep. The crawler took them down first, slow, steady lights, vanishing into the white. The snowcat followed with a tow chain for the abandoned SUVs later. I trailed in the plow trench, holding just long enough. Back home hours later, body aching from the fight, I sat in the quiet cab long after shutting down. Hands trembled not from cold now, but release. On the porch waited a small box, no note at first glance. Inside premium thermal gloves, high-end the kind built for real work. And a folded paper. For everything you do, Ridgepoint is starting to see. No signature needed. The storm had raged, but something had broken through the ice. Respect earned in the hardest way. And this time, it might just last. The local news story broke the next morning, catching me off guard, as I sipped coffee and watched the storm's remnants taper into lazy flurries. I hadn't spoken to any reporters, hadn't sought the spotlight. But someone, a paramedic perhaps, or a deputy, had passed along details, and the station ran with it. The headline was straightforward and unflinching. HOA board rescued. Twice by local resident after blocking key emergency route. They called me a community hero, detailed the blizzard's fury, the blocked East Ridge access road, the convoy disasters, and how one man, with an old plow, had twice carved paths when professionals couldn't. A blurry photo accompanied it, my International 4900 mid-push, through the second storm blade, throwing snow in a frozen arc, orange lights slicing the whiteout like a beacon. It looked almost heroic, though I knew the truth it was just duty. What hit harder were the online comments, hundreds pouring in from neighbors, locals, even folks from nearby towns who'd faced similar winters. Tom Braddock's been keeping those roads open for years. The HOA should be thanking him on their knees. My dad made it to chemo because of him back in 18. Finding a guy like that disgraceful. And he warned them, twice, and still showed up. That's what real community looks like. Targeted for helping, then saves the ones targeting him. Hope the board learned something. The support was overwhelming, a wave of validation from people who'd seen my truck out at dawn year after year. It spread beyond our development, shared on community forums, picked up by regional outlets, framing it as bureaucracy versus neighborly grit. The HOA felt the heat immediately. 3 days later, the next board meeting was announced, open session clubhouse packed tighter than I'd ever seen. I hadn't planned to attend. Those rooms usually reeked of stale coffee and ego. But something pulled me there, not vengeance, but a sense that closure mattered. I arrived early wearing my usual work jacket scarred from salt and years. The room hushed as I took a seat near the back. Derek stood at the podium, notes stacked, but his usual polish seemed dimmed, shoulders a touch slumped, eyes avoiding the crowd at first. He cleared his throat and began, voice steadier than I expected. Most of you know about the recent storms. What happened up on East Ridge was preventable. We made decisions focused on liability and standardization, believing they served the community best. Murmurs rippled agreement mixed with skepticism. But those choices ignored experience, history, the people who've kept us safe long before new contracts or logos. He paused, scanning the room until his gaze landed on me. I want to publicly thank Thomas Braddock for his actions during both events. When we were stranded, unable to reach help, facing real danger, he came. Twice. He did what no one else could or would. The room stilled completely. He risked his life to save ours, including mine, indirectly. And for that, the board owes him more than words. A few gasps, then he continued. I propose immediate reinstatement of Mr. Braddock as designated emergency snow removal operator for Ridgepoint Estates, full indemnity, no restrictions with board support and compensation for equipment and time. Hands shot up, but the vote was swift, unanimous. No debate. Even Lynn seconded without hesitation. Someone asked if I wanted to speak. I walked to the front, slowly, boots echoing on the floor. No notes. Just the weight of the room's eyes, some I'd helped anonymously for years. I didn't clear those roads for authorization, I said plainly. I did it because people needed to get home. To hospitals, to their families. A pause, letting it sink. I'm not here for payback. But remember this when rules clash with reality. It's neighbors who carry us through, not committees or contracts. Storms don't read bylaws. Silence held for a beat. Then applause real rising, not polite clapping, but something deeper. Standing ovation from folks in the back, petitions waving like flags. Derek approached as it died down, extending a hand. I took it firm grip, eyes meeting mine, without deflection. We were blind, Tom, arrogant. It took the cold to open our eyes. Maybe, I replied. Just don't let it freeze over again. He nodded, something like respect settling in his expression. Outside, snow melted under a weak sun, the world thawing. Neighbors stopped me on the way out, thanks handshakes, a few quiet apologies from bored allies. That night, another unsigned note in the mailbox. Mr. Braddock, we saw you as just a man with a plow. Our mistake. You're why we have a way out. Thank you. No need for names. The news had shown a light, the meeting sealed it. But the real change, it was in the air, crisper, clearer. Winter wasn't over, but the deepest freeze had finally broken. And for the first time, I felt like the road ahead was truly open. With the storms finally relenting and the HOA's public shift, winter began to loosen its grip on Ridgepoint. Late March brought the first true thaw sun, lingering longer icicles dripping from eaves in steady rhythms, snowbanks slumping into gray slush along curbs. One final squall lashed through sleet, rattling windows and glazing sidewalks, but it felt hollow, a last gasp from a bully running out of steam. The mountains shed their white cloak, reluctantly revealing patches of brown earth and the promise of green. The change in the air went beyond weather. That old tension, the sidelong glances, when I'd pass neighbors, the whisper of complaints or doubts, started melting too. People I'd nodded to for years now stopped for real conversations. Tom, that pie was nothing compared to what you did. Heard the boards eating crow about time. Small gestures piled up, a six-pack on the porch from the dialysis guy, a handwritten card from the nurse's family. The real turning point came with a knock one mild afternoon. Lynn stood there, vice president, no more in title, but still carrying that clipboard habit. Spring jacket hair tied back, no blazer or logo in sight. We're putting together a community day, she said straightforward. Nothing fancy, potluck games for kids, a chance to reconnect after all this. We'd like you involved. I leaned on the doorframe. Involved how? As the speaker. Keynote if you're willing. I almost laughed. I'm better with a plow than a podium. She smiled, genuine, not the tight boardroom version. That's exactly why. People need to hear from someone real. I thought it over, nodded. All right. The event unfolded under a rented white tent on the Greenbelt, the kind used for weddings or casual gatherings. Smoke curled from barbecues. Kids chased each other with foam swords across thawing grass, laughter cutting through the crisp air. Tables groaned under casseroles, salads, desserts from every household. For the first time in memory, it felt like a neighborhood, not a regulated zone. I took the mic under the tent, simple setup with a portable speaker. Faces looked up, familiar, expectant. Derek in the back, arms crossed but attentive. Lynn nearby, encouraging nod. I kept it short, honest. Winter hit us hard this year. Twice folks got caught because decisions prioritized paper over people. But storms don't care about votes or contracts. They just come. A pause, scanning the crowd. What matters is how we respond. I cleared those roads not for thanks or titles, but because someone had to. Neighbors do that for each other. That's the real strength here, not rules that bind us, but the ones that lift us when the world turns white and unforgiving. Silence, then applause, warm, sustained, folks standing one by one. Derek approached as it faded, no entourage. Tommy said quietly, "We owe you more than a speech spot." I waited. He pulled a small metal tag from his pocket, official, etched with the HOA seal. Designated Emergency Operator, Ridgepoint Estates, authorized T. Braddock, full indemnity and support. This makes it formal, he explained. No fines, no barriers. Paid for fuel maintenance. You're in charge of winter ops. I turned it over in my hand, heavy, solid. One condition, I said. Name it. Listen next time. To warnings. To experience. Before the mountain decides for you. He met my eyes, no flinch. I will. We will. Spring fully arrived that week, snow vanishing from roofs, the East Ridge access road drying with cracks from the freeze-thaw cycle. I patched a shoulder myself, one dawn, old habit. The asphalt warm under the rising sun. Teenagers sledded down Hawthorne Hill on leftover patches, shrieks echoing where luxury SUVs once lay buried. The irony made me smile. Betty McLaren visited again, Tupperware in hand, peach cobbler, steam rising. You gave them their jobs back, you know, she teased. And their humility. Didn't do it for them. I know, that's why it stuck. She winked and left. Evenings on the porch became peaceful. No scanner static, no urgent calls. Stars-sharp overhead breeze stirring new leaves. No more barricades, no fines. Just the quiet knowledge that the community had shifted, humbled, united. The HOA changed too subtly, but surely. Newsletters focused on preparedness tips, not violations. Derek even asked my input on the next contract. Sometimes a whiteout is needed to see clearly. And the man they tried to silence, he became the one they turned to. Trusted, essential, home. By late April, winter had finally surrendered completely to spring in Ridgepoint Estates. The last stubborn snowbanks along the curbs shrank to nothing, revealing forgotten toys and stray gloves that had vanished months earlier. Water rushed in cheerful rivulets down gutters, carrying away grit and salt, while the foothills bloomed with the first tentative greens aspens, unfurling pale leaves wildflowers, pushing through thawed soil like quiet promises. The East Ridge access road dried out fully, its asphalt cracked in places from the freeze-thaw cycles, but solid and open, no orange barricades in sight. The deeper thaw, the one in people, was slower but unmistakable. Neighbors I'd passed for years with only nods now waved me over for real talks. The single mom from Elm Street left a thank you card with her kids' drawings of a big red plow. The dialysis regular stopped by with fresh-baked bread, insisting I take half. Even strangers in the grocery store recognized me from the news clip, offering quiet words of appreciation. It wasn't fame I wanted, never had been. But the shift felt right, like the community breathing easier after holding its breath too long. One warm evening, as I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the peaks, Derek appeared at the end of my walkway. No SUV idling at the curb. No bored entourage, just him in jeans and a plain jacket, hands in pockets. "Mind if I join you a minute?" he asked. I gestured to the empty chair. He sat staring out at the quiet street for a while before speaking. "I've been thinking about those storms nonstop," he said finally. "How close it came. How wrong we were from the start." I nodded, letting him continue. "We thought rules would protect us. Standardization, contracts. But out there, rules didn't push snow. They didn't get people home safe." He turned to me, voice steady but earnest. "You did, every time. Even after we tried to shut you out." I sipped my coffee. "Wasn't about settling scores, Derek. Just about doing what needed doing." "I know. And that's what changed everything." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, the new emergency operations plan, my name at the top as lead coordinator. "This is official now, but more than that, thank you. For pulling us through, for not letting our mistakes become tragedies." I took the paper, scanned it briefly. Full support resources, even a modest stipend for maintenance. "Appreciate it," I said. "But keep listening to the weather, to the folks who've been through it. That's all I ask." He stood, extended a hand. This time, the shake felt different, equal, genuine. "We will, starting now." He left without fanfare, footsteps fading down the walk. Betty McLaren's final visit came a week later, her pink coat swapped for a light sweater, cobbler in hand as always. "You did good, Mr. Braddock," she said, settling on the porch step. "Gave them a second chance without rubbing it in. They earned the lesson the hard way." She chuckled. "Cold's a harsh teacher, but thorough." We sat in comfortable silence, watching kids bike past the neighborhood, alive with ordinary joys. That night, under a sky full of stars unhidden by clouds, I reflected on it all. The barricades, the fines, the blizzards that nearly broke us. The rescues that forged something stronger. I'd never sought a title or applause. Just clear roads so people could live their lives. In the end, the storms had stripped away the blindness, the denial, the ego, the petty power plays. What remained was raw and real respect, earned not in meetings or newsletters, but in the worst moments when someone showed up regardless. The HOA hadn't just been humbled. They'd been transformed. And so had the neighborhood. Sometimes it takes a whiteout to see clearly, to reveal who's been holding the line all along. The one they tried to shut out became the one who got them all home, safe, together. And as summer approached, with no snow in sight, I knew one thing for certain. Next winter, whenever it came, the East Ridge access road would be ready. Because now we all understood what it truly meant to keep a community moving.